And that's another question for Greg, that is about what matters first for priority. What the company should back up the and what's the most difficult to backup and restore, in your opinion?
Okay, so the first short answer to your question is what we should back up is everything. Because at the end of the day, we would love to, in case of disaster scenario, we would love to restore everything and continue working with all the data as nothing happened. So the dream scenario would be to back up everything. However, this is typically not possible. One, because of technical limitations that some companies face. Second, because the duration of backup or restore might be difficult. So we need to prioritize. And in prioritizing, when I design the backup strategy with the customer, for example, for the source code or the projects that they have, let's say in GitHub or in similar platform, I'm always asking them, okay, which of the projects are the mission critical ones that you're working on today, right now, and which of those are your archive? Something that you've done some time, you keep this code because it's application that's currently running your business, but it's not something that you're actively developing. And if we define those mission critical data, then we make the backups of this data with higher frequency. And typically, we even keep them in a separate storage because of how important they are. And if we have the data that we consider archive, then we maybe back up them with less frequency, and maybe we put them in a separate location. It's about assigning resources to the most important data and focusing especially on the DevOps processes and the software development. One thing which is very often neglected is that people say, okay, but why do I need to think in any specific way about my source code data or GitHub backup data or Bitbucket backup data? Because the source code itself is already distributed among developers. And even if we have some disaster scenario, even if we have failure of GitHub, we can still retrieve the source code from one of the developers' laptops. But the true point is, okay, but how much of your work every day is actually writing the code? How much of this are merges, pull requests, comments that you make in those projects, updating the wiki, making documentation, etc., everything around that. And this is part which is especially neglected if we are just starting with thinking about backup. So while building backup strategy, especially for DevOps organization, we should think, okay, it's not only about protecting the source code, it's also about everything else that sits in this platform, like sits in the GitHub, that actually constitutes your day-to-day work. Because the outcome of a good backup strategy is allowing you and your team to continue working as nothing happened. And if I would right now come in and remove all the issues from your GitHub or from your GitLab, you would probably say, no, I cannot continue working like this. So protecting just the source code is not enough.
Cool point.
Cool.
And this reminded me about a story that I don't know if it's true, but I heard when I was, I don't know, in the university time, that a company they were using Search Safe back then. You remember the Search Safe? For Visual Basic 6, the guys was using for Delphi and all these languages, but it was Search Safe, SVN, Subversion, this old stuff. Huh? And this company, they had a full platform of documentation on how to use their software. And on the documentation, they have code examples, like because it was for developers. So they had part of the source code examples, and so on and so forth. And their Search Safe server, it was lost. So they basically lost the whole source code of the application. How they restored the documentation was separate platform. So they basically are copy and paste page by page from the documentation parts of the source code that they had to try to rebuild the whole software. As far as I know, the history say that they could repair like 70-75% of the source code. Could be zero, so it's okay-ish. But imagine how fucking work they had to do. Hours, taking, copying, paste, checking, rebuilding, like, oh my God. I remember once I had to do some maintenance on some legacy code that they didn't have the source code as well. So I needed to take the DLL, do the decompile of the DLL to see the code, to be able to do something and rebuild because they needed to do some specific changes. Like backups, usually, as we said, as Greg just said and Ben mentioned, it's important for data in general, data that we manipulate, but for our metadata, for our operation data, it's something very crucial. It's something that we cannot neglect again.
E aí, gostou desse corte? Então segue, continua, que tem muito mais.